why do we feel often resistance against changing our communication skills? Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology and HR. My name is Gerhard. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, here in the Republic of Moldova, specialized in international, intercultural and multi-language contexts. The following are true for almost any behavior change. So it's not something very specific to changing communication skills. Of course, we resist change. That's a common observation. Or if we don't observe it within ourselves, we observe it with others. Why do you never do this or that? What are psychological reasons for that? The first is that communication itself is an umbrella term for many micro skills, behaviors, habits, and especially if we are convinced that we are a bad communicator and we start watching ourselves on tape, on video or audio, we can make a long list of things we dislike about our communication. It's body language, it's our voice, it's the clarity of our thoughts, it's grammar, it's vocabulary, either too limited or too artificial, academic. So we can make a laundry list of defects. And often in our personal history, others have given us such laundry lists of our defects. And over time, that what we hear from others is internalized in our own self-concept. So if lots of people tell you, oh, you look so nervous on stage, or you seem not knowing what you want to say, over time a child internalizes and thinks, yeah, I'm always nervous on stage and I have difficulties in expressing what I think. Now, the moment you have this laundry list, the problem is, where do I start? And most start with what is most accessible. And most accessible nowadays is either Instagram, TikTok, or AI, artificial intelligence. But the problem with AI, so that is basically, I think, the better direction, but the quality of the answer depends on your input. So yes, I myself get a lot of insights about my behaviors from AI, or I check things, or want to see things from other perspectives. But ideally, AI would have access to lots of recordings of different interactions with other people to give an assessment, of my voice, pronunciation, and so on. So now that's one issue. It's too overwhelming, and every one of those micro skills, be it pronunciation and body language, is something that's very difficult to change. So even if AI tells you that you should stand upright or you should be grounded, with the feet firmly touching the ground, in reality that's one thing to know that, but how to change every one of those micro skills, it's actually hard work. Like playing the piano, the violin, learning in a foreign language, all those micro skills are very complicated. So I won't give you the solution now, but that's the big problem. And then, of course, we may think, well, if it's so complicated, I better give it up, because until now I somehow managed in life. The second motive is the so-called sunk cost effect. Often we resist change because we have already invested years of our lives in maintaining a certain position or in certain behaviors. So the sunk cost effect in economics describes a situation when you continue investing in a project although the project already has no chance of success. For example, you got a tip that in this mountainous region in 5 years there will be a hotspot for tourists. And you invest in a hotel, building a hotel there, and you've already spent maybe 80% of your capital. When, for example, a news story hits that, let's say, make it a bit extreme, that somebody discovered there is just behind your hotel, they found a dump site for radioactive waste or something like that. Well, it's extreme, but things like that happen. Actually, in Germany, for example, in the hometown where I'm from, people bought houses on former farmland, only then later to discover that farmers of that region had allowed a neighboring paper factory to dump their waste there. And this waste contained dioxin or some very cancerogenic chemical element. I'm not good in chemistry. And suddenly this whole neighborhood became an uproar because people were still building there and so on. So my extreme example may actually not be so extreme. No, you started building the hotel is almost ready. Then your news story comes, and it's clear who wants to build a hotel near Chernobyl, for example. Good. Now, the logical thing would be in such a situation, well, with the radioactive waste, maybe even the sunk cost effect will not take place because it's too extreme. But even in such a situation, then people continue to build the hotel to the end and spend the remaining 20% of their capital because they already feel they are invested in this and they want to finish it. And then people rationalize, well, maybe in 1 year they find a way to clean up or take out the waste and send it somewhere else. And this is the same mechanism we have in many other behaviors. So it's too painful to realize that 20 or more years of my life I neglected important communication truth, and I better ignore the existence of those truths and communicate the way I communicated before. Because the moment I change, I also publicly acknowledge that my life until now was a failure. My investment was a failure. The third one is that it feels to ourselves wrong. I did an internship at the university and majoring in psychology, in neuropsychology. So people who have had a stroke, sometimes they remain bent forward, like have an unnatural body posture. And then in physiotherapy, they are righted, they are made stand right by the therapist. And the patient immediately has panic because he subjectively feels that this is the equilibrium and this is upright, and the real upright position for them, it's falling backwards. And in many other parts of our life, we also have an objectively not straight position, but we feel it. So our style of communication may feel like the standard, so we are in the right, and the new, objectively better style of communicating feels wrong. For example, a practical example here in the Republic of Moldova and in the former Soviet Union. So I often give the communication advice to clarify questions. So if you get a task, you clarify if you have heard everything correctly, or somebody asks you a question, and then you clarify the question and before starting a monologue of 20 minutes telling something. For example, concrete example, somebody asks you, an interviewer asks you, tell me something about your life. And the typical person would immediately rant, say, well, I was born in this city and so on. And I suggest to do the following, for example, as a general tactic, also to win time. Say, well, are you interested in my recent activities, or should we start with the kindergarten? And then, so this is, I think, believe a normal procedure, and we need to do this in interactions with clients, because very often the client has a certain intention and we interpret wrongly. So clarifying questions is a very important tool. But in the specific context here, this feels for many wrong. It feels like showing you didn't understand the question, or because people are like drilled, like in school. They have to stand up, the teacher asks a question, and then you spit out a long answer, and then they can sit down. So they are not trained to do this instinctively, and clarifying for them feels like falling backward to the person with a stroke. And that with many things, like, for example, if I object, for example, in my case, I subjectively feel that I speak at the right speed. Of course, we always believe we are correct. I often get feedback that I speak too slowly. So when I speak faster, I feel that I'm not in the equilibrium. I'm speaking too fast. So my subjective perception and the objective perception of the listener differ. And so it will be very difficult for me to adopt a speaking style that is a bit faster, because I will always return to the equilibrium. And the last motive is, and it's not bad intentions, that people around us want us to stay the same. Not due to bad intentions, but if you think if of the people around you, your husband, your wife, your children, we already have put them in certain drawers in our mind. They have certain labels, we know how they are. So now having to potentially revise all those assessments of the people around us based on what trainings they do and what they change in their life, it's a complicated task actually. And it's much more complicated than we believe. So for me, it's much easier to make the other person return to their previous state, so that I don't need to change my perception of that. And that happens with people who have dependencies like alcoholism and so on. So if for almost my entire life, a certain person is the alcoholic, or overweight and so on, if the person changes, I need also to change my position towards the person. So it was comfortable for me to look very lean and sportive. Now if the other person becomes more muscular or fit than I myself, well, then I look bad somehow. And the same with communication. If the other nervous person that cannot formulate questions now becomes a communicative superstar in the company, well, how do I look then? And then there are all kinds of psychological mechanisms, explicit, implicit, to push the other person back, and for example through gaslighting, so the other person may objectively be a much more convincing speaker, but not intentionally, but you stay, well, you are still nervous. So, and you dishearten the other person to give it up, to stick in their lane. Does it make sense for you? Please give me your comments and questions, and we meet next week. Bye-bye.